Hello there, aspiring Tennos. So, we have to talk about GYRE already. I think she is very strong. I think she has a lot of potential, but we have to talk about this one aspect of a kit because I think it's very important to call attention to it. Also, I'm trying to hit 400 subscribers at the end of this week. That is very ambitious. If you guys could help me by subscribing, even if you choose to get no notifications, that would be a huge help. Thank you so much in advance. Anyways, so GYRE, she's our newest playable character in Warframe, with, in my opinion, a stellar design. I think she was well made in terms of the way she looks, and the visual department has been knocking it out of the park for the last couple of years. She also has a truckload of potential, and after such a weak release, and Irelia, hate you so much, it's nice to see a frame which pretty much already works right out of the box. She just needs a little bit of love. So anyways, she's the second electricity-based Warframe introduced into the game, and I'll say that Volt more so embodies the concept of electricity with his speed boost and his ultimate, which don't actually apply shock procs. Well, it does, but it also stuns enemies in a different way. But you would be excused for not knowing this, but more on this later on when we compare it to our newest character, which is GYRE, right? So GYRE actually makes heavy use of the shock procs, which in my opinion more strongly connects her to the mechanic of electricity as it appears in Warframe. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. GYRE's first ability is called Arc Sphere. That's a bit tough to say. You launch a projectile that stops on contact with enemies or when it comes in contact with a piece of terrain, after which it will shock the enemies periodically in a pretty large area, to be honest. This is definitely her weakest ability and thus the one which I probably will subsume over. Her second ability is Coil Horizon, which is basically a physics-based lava that only lasts 1 second. So you will probably have a bit of an easier time getting it to where it needs to be because you can roll it on the ground and it does move relatively fast. However, the decreased duration does hurt the ability a lot. Now with her third ability, this is where things derail a little bit. I think it's pronounced Cohort Grace. Anyways, this ability both have a duration and a cooldown, and the duration can exceed the cooldown, right? Which means that you'll be able to cast it immediately again. When you get a kill, you extend the duration of the third ability. This means that it could essentially be active forever, which it probably will be if you're doing even remotely well on the steel path, because you will be building a little bit of duration, and the more duration you have, the more duration you get back on that ability each time you kill. Okay. Anyways, while it's active, you'll get a little bit of crit chance and you'll get some energy regen. Now, that's not super strong on most Warframes, but on GYRE it is actually very powerful, and you will feel a huge difference between it being on and it not being on. We'll get to that, but it's all because of the way that her ultimate works, her roads as well. So other than being her fourth ability, it's also where all of your damage will be coming from, more or less. While in range of enemies, you will deal damage to them and apply 1 shock proc. If this ability crits, the abilities, not your weapons, if the ability crits, then it will discharge on that enemy, which will deal a lot of damage to them, apply a shock proc, and then chain to nearby enemies. So, this has synergy with the passive. For each shock proc on a target, you are 10% more likely to crit that enemy. Not with your weapons, but with GYRE specifically. Okay, so basically, if you apply a lot of shock procs, either with a cheap primer or just with her kit, you can do this. So obviously, her kill potential is through the roof. Not so much against the Grineer specifically, because they are very resilient towards electricity, whereas Corpus is weak to it. So she's neutral against the infested, strong against Corpus, and terribly weak against the Grineer, since pretty much all of the damage is electricity, and they don't... Well, it's weak against armor, and it's weak against that kind of enemy type. It has a penalty specifically against them. So we won't really see her ever excel there, but that's fine. She has a niece being really good against the Corpus, and that's fine. Anyways, so I just showed you a clip where GYRE goes off and just absolutely nukes the screen on the steel path. And so a frame that can do this must be pretty meta, right? Well, the observant ones of you watching will probably be thinking what I was thinking when her abilities were first revealed. How is he going to survive? I don't say this to be facetious, but the simple answer is he won't. Let's return to my point about Volt's ult not applying shock procs normally. The duration of the stagger caused by a shock proc is slightly shorter than the interval between a new stagger being applied by a shock proc. What this usually means is that enemies will get off a shot between each stun. If you've ever seen enemies caught in the web of lightning between enemies of Volt's ultimate, you will know that they do not move while this process is active. So these enemies ignore this slight cooldown and are able to be stunned again immediately, which makes it a much stronger CC tool. The thing is, if the enemies get off one shot between each stagger, between each stun, and the first bullet rips off your shields clean, and the second one outright kills you, that's really bad news for GYRE, because he is really squishy, like really squishy, and you cannot CC every single last enemy on the screen constantly for 30 minutes or an hour or 8 hours or however long you decide to go. So the shock procs allowing the enemies to attack in between is really bad news. You know, you can't deal damage if you're dead on the ground. Anyways, the good news is that this is not a Irelia situation where the frame is fundamentally broken. GYRE just needs a tiny bit of help to be viable on the steel path. You know, if she had a hidden passive that caused enemies to be stunned slightly longer by a shock proc, that would probably be good enough. Unfortunately, in her current state, she's really strong when playing with a support, with a proper support that can give her the kind of support that she needs, which is either a really strong CC or invisibility or a lot of damage reduction. GYRE, for example, could do this. Then you would have to build her for it, of course. Now, she might have been able to do okay with Gloom, even though she can't really sustain that. She's a little bit too energy hungry, but maybe we could have made that work, though it would have made it a little bit less efficient because you'd have to build for it a little bit more. But that's not really gonna work now because of the new Eximus, which we'll talk more about in the next video. But every time an Eximus pops up on my screen, it's pretty much just game over, because you can't deal with them and deal damage to the enemies at the same time. So either you have to slow down too much that you fall behind the life support, or else you have to die to the Eximus, which is going to slow you down anyways, even if you know, whatever. So unfortunately, she's in a little bit of a rough spot, but she's not in any way unfixable. And I know that the, generally speaking, tends to give Warframes buffs when they've just been released. So let's hope to see this video or someone else talking about this, and it will be fixed soon, because I'm excited to play with her once she has been buffed up a little bit. Anyways, I hope that you've enjoyed.